Tom, thanks so much for coming on my show, my man.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So before we get started and I start grilling you with a ton of questions, because I have a lot of awesome questions for you today, is there anything you want to share with my audience about yourself? A little intro you want to do?
Yeah, Brandon, I've been studying habit formation and how wealthy people become wealthy and how poor people become poor. And I've been doing that for 14 years. I'm a CPA by trade, but I stumbled into this study. I did a 5-year study on over 200 wealthy people and over 100 poor people, individuals who were poor. And what I found out was what I consider the holy grail to success is that your daily habits are the reason why you're rich or poor. A lot of people don't realize it's the little things that they do every single day. Those little things, they build up like snowflakes on a mountainside. And if you've got a lot of rich habits, you're going to have an avalanche of success one day. And if you have a lot of what I call poverty habits, you're going to have an avalanche of financial failure. And so I'm trying to get the message out there so that everybody can tweak their habits and improve their lives and have some success.
It's awesome, Tom. I love that, man. And I think this is going to be a very powerful episode for our listeners today because not only do you have a ton of unique knowledge around habit forming and what that does to our brain and how it promotes a healthy brain and allows us to perform better cognitively, but I think it's a really big thing for us to cover a little bit what these habits are that allow people to get to financial freedom. Because when we talk about emotional, physical, mental health, it's really hard to get out of that overwhelm and not have that sympathetic or fight or flight response when you are in poverty. Because then in the back of your mind, you're always thinking to yourself, well, how am I going to make rent next month? Or how am I going to pay these bills? And we really want to find out how people can perform their best. And it's impossible to perform your best if you're not in your present moment and if you're being taken away from those moments through financial stress. So
yeah, there's no question that the poor people were wallowing in negativity, and amazingly, the wealthy people were the opposite. They were completely pumped up, optimistic, and it wasn't Brandon because they were wealthy. They were that way, and then they became wealthy. So the problem is putting the cart before the horse. It's your thinking. I call it rich thinking versus poverty thinking. When you're poor, you have poverty thinking. When you're rich, you have rich thinking, and they're precursors to your success or your poverty.
So recently, you're over talking with Dave Asprey, and you've been on CNBC. You're featured in Success Magazine right now, and you talk about a lot of this stuff. I really want to talk about to start about some of the stuff that you were featured by Dave Asprey on, talking about the power of habits in creating better cognitive performance, neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. Can you talk us through, what habits create this cognitive growth, and what are some of the practical applications of them?
Yeah, sure. But let me just lay the groundwork. There's really, to simplify it, our brains is really made up of 3 parts, Brandon. It's the neocortex, also known as the cerebellum. That's like 80% of our brain. It's the newest part of the brain. It's the most recent evolutionary part of the brain. And then there's the limbic system, which is the second oldest part, and the brain stem. Now, the limbic system is where something called the basal ganglia resides. It's a mound of neurons that are about the size of a walnut, and they actually have identified the basal ganglia as critical to habit formation. And the brain stem is the thing that we're always fighting against. When you brought it up, the fight or flight syndrome. The neocortex, the cerebellum, can override the brain stem and the fight or flight syndrome, but more often than not, it's the other way around. The whole idea about having good success habits is to control all 3 parts of the brain, because the limbic system, where your habit formation resides and also where your emotions reside, that can play havoc with your life and success. If you have bad habits and you allow your emotions to get the better of you, then you're not putting your neocortex to work to control your habits and your emotions. And you're also not putting it to work if you're constantly fearful, worrying, under stress. Long-term stress is detrimental to your health. It's been proven to cause cancer, all sorts of other diseases, because it depresses the immune system. So what creates these health issues is stress, and what creates the stress is the way we think. And if we think negatively and we worry and we have all these fears and we give in to them, that stress becomes long-term and it's debilitating to our health. So we have the ability to control these things through our habits. The interesting thing is that most people aren't aware that their habits are the reason why they're rich, poor, or in the middle class. They just don't think about habits as that critical. They look at wealthy people and they think, well, they're wealthy because they're at the right time at the right place, or they know the right people. Well, they got to the right time at the right place and got to know these right people because of their habits. They have relationship building habits, the hello call, the happy birthday call, the life event call. They do these things to build relationships, make them stronger. They have other habits like self-education, daily self-reading, 30 minutes a day. They engage in that. Wealthy people, poor people don't. They are constantly growing their knowledge base. And that's really important, because when you increase your knowledge base, Brandon, you are now all of a sudden opening yourself up to seeing opportunities that you didn't see before. Well, poor people don't see opportunities because they're not doing the work to help them gain the knowledge to see those opportunities. Wealthy people are, by and large, very open-minded. They're looking for new information. They're constantly challenging their belief systems. And the reason that they're successful is because of that. They are optimistic. They practice gratitude. They do a lot of these habits, and these rich thinking habits, and these other habits like the reading and like building relationships. They lay the groundwork for success. And then at some point in their lives, they have what I told you earlier, the avalanche of success. These habits, they build up and they build up. They're accumulating over time, and eventually, like, I'll give you an example. One of the individuals in my study, he called me up shortly after, it was after 2008 when the stock market just tanked. And he said he just got fired from his job, and he worked for the largest financial services company in the nation, in the world, I think. He got fired. His job was he ran the commodities desk. So he got fired. Everybody got, a lot of people got let go and downsized. And he called me up to let me know. And I said, oh, that's too bad. And he goes, I'm not worried about it. And I said, why not? And he goes, oh, I'll get a job. I said, you seem so confident. He goes, oh, yeah, I'll just make a couple of phone calls and I'll get a job. And so he called me back a couple of weeks later and he said, yeah, I took a couple of weeks off and then made a phone call. And next week I'm going to be running the commodities desk at some other big financial services company. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, oh, I helped mentor so many people, develop so many strong relationships, and help mentor so many people. I just called up one of the people I mentored, and now, ironically, he's going to be my boss. But I got a job, and he said, the great thing is I'm getting paid more money, and I have an opportunity to get a higher bonus. And by the way, this guy was, in the $500,000 to $700,000 a year neighborhood. So that means probably closer to $1 million. That was interesting how his rich habits, he leaned on them. That's the thing. These habits, because they're so beneficial in developing relationships, and creating a reputation for yourself. It doesn't take much much effort for you to tap one of your relationships that you build through these rich habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super powerful. So would you say one of the most prevalent habits you saw as far as relationship building goes, people who, I heard you say, they're the kind of people who make those calls and, wish people happy birthday, happy anniversary, check in and say, hey, how are you doing after some time?
Right.
Also the kind of people that are constantly contributing back and giving, paying it forward essentially and helping people come up under the ranks underneath them.
Oh yeah, they're doing it in all sorts of ways. It's not just within the organization. One of the things that wealthy people are very good at is being mentors.
Mm.
They mentor people. They teach people. They're so willing to share their knowledge with people, and there's a good reason for that because somebody along the line did the same thing to them. And in fact, 93% of the wealthy people in my study who had a mentor, they attributed almost all of their wealth to that mentor. So they look at mentorship as critical to success. And so they're not only doing it within their organizations and their small businesses, they're members, they're board members, they're on committees of nonprofit groups. They're running nonprofit groups. They're helping to obtain the funding to keep the nonprofit groups running. And, you know, Brandon, this is an interesting thing that I uncovered. On these nonprofit groups, most of these board members and these committee members are other successful people. So when you volunteer, and wealthy people in my study, they volunteered on average 5 hours or more a month. They're developing these strong relationships, and because they have so many relationships, they're helping other people who volunteer get better jobs or get jobs. They're helping the kids get into colleges by writing letters, you know, to help them open the doors. They might know people in colleges. They might be able to get them internships during college, and also they can help them get jobs. And I remember teaching this to my son, who works for a big company on Wall Street, and I told him, look, this is what I learned in my research. You've got to mentor people. It's going to be probably the most valuable thing that you can do. He was at Providence College. He was on the board of programmers. They ran all of the events in the school. They brought in all the speakers. My son brought in speakers like Rudy Giuliani, and you know, just name any big celebrity. He was talking to them and getting them to come to the school. So he started mentoring the new freshmen that came in and the sophomores and that got into the board of programming that were accepted. And it's hard to get into that organization. And he started mentoring them. Well, one of the individuals who he mentored, who was 2 years younger than him, his dad was the number 3 guy at the company that he's working at. Mm-hmm. And when Brendan graduated, it was 2011, the unemployment rate for college graduates was somewhere close to 60-70%. It was horrible. But he got a job. He got a job working for a big company, the job that he wanted, because he paid it forward by following one of the rich habits, which is mentoring people.
That's huge, yeah. And it's interesting because I'm still in my infant stages of growing my company, but I get approached quite a bit now to mentor people, and I feel a very strong motivation to do that because, there's people who have helped me, and you kind of realize, like, well, none of this would have happened for me if it wasn't for mentors I've had. And I don't know, I feel like people who are successful really, they feel the obligation to pay it forward, and it's fulfilling as well, to be able to see someone else have success because of the contribution that you made in their lives. So
yeah, at some point, in my study, the wealthy, they had so much money. It wasn't about money. It became a different thing. It became a legacy issue. Mm-hmm. So their thing was, look, I want to improve the lives of the people I care about. The interesting thing is not every person that comes into the orbit of a wealthy person is allowed to stay in that orbit. Mm-hmm. Wealthy people are very particular about who they associate with. It's called the law of association. I like to look at it as the relationship seesaw. So you have wealthy people have on their seesaw far more rich relationships than they have poverty relationships. Mm-hmm. We all have rich relationships. We all have poverty relationships. But the wealthy people make it a habit to purge some of the time that they spend with their poverty relationships. They don't abandon their poverty relationships because in a lot of cases they're family and friends.
Yeah.
But what they do is they minimize their exposure to them. Right? And what they do is they increase their exposure to their rich relationships. There are other like-minded, successful people that they want to associate with. And there's a reason for that. They know that those successful people are going to be able to open doors not only for them but for the people that they've allowed into their orbit. Through the law of association, what you want to do is you want to minimize the time that you spend with your poverty relationships to somewhere less than an hour a week, if you can. You can't do that with family, but you can do that with friends who might be dragging you down. And what happen? And when they drag you down, Brandon, it's almost invisible. You don't see it. It's negative talk. It's mostly negativity. It's negative talk. It's always having to come to the rescue when they need money. They're struggling in life. People that are struggling in life, they're always reaching out and looking for people to help them because they have bad habits, they have poverty habits. So you want to minimize your exposure to those people because they take up your time, number one. Number two, they change your mindset. When you're with them, your positive mindset shifts. So that's an important thing in the relationship. So get that tipping. If you start out, whatever it is, your goal should be to get that to tip. More than 50% of your time should be spent with your rich relationships. And if you don't have any rich relationships, join nonprofit groups. There's plenty of rich people on those nonprofit group boards and committees.
Yeah, and I really feel like this is something that can be applied to like every aspect of life, I'd say. As far as like if you're trying to become more financially abundant, then spending more time with people who are financially wealthy. But the same thing goes for like if you're trying to make a large change in your physical health. Like if you're spending more time with people who are very healthy and have really good healthy habits, like they're going to be the kind of people who are eating clean and eating healthy foods all the time. So it's going to be easier when you're around them. They're the kind of people who are going to be like, hey, let's go for a hike, versus like, the people who want to sit around and watch TV, eat shitty
That's
food.
Right.
And, I could see this applied to as a metaphor for like everything.
Yeah, well, it's one of the interesting things that I found in my research is this notion of accountability partners. Mm-hmm. If you're the type of person that needs external motivation, that you, for whatever reason, you lack the internal motivation, one of the ways around that is to get an accountability partner. Now, you can do it in business. You can do it in business through mastermind groups, through just having someone. There has to be a weekly thing if you're doing it in business. You have to talk. There has to be someone as an accountability partner who that's holding your feet to the fire. Hey, Brandon, you said you were going to do this. Did you get this done this week? Mm-hmm. No, why not? And so every week you've got that accountability partner who's going to hold your feet to the fire. So guess what happens? You get the work done. Mm-hmm. And you might even be doing it, a day before, 2 days before, but you're getting it done is the important thing. And when it comes to your health, when you have someone that you work out with, 1 or 2 people is ideal. Ideally, 2 people, because sometimes one person may not be able to make it. So if you have 2 people that you're exercising with, whether you're outside running or you go to the gym, if you have them as your accountability partners, it's going to be harder for you to miss a workout because they're going to be there. Mm-hmm. And I have my wife does it because she sometimes he says, I don't feel like working out. I said, you know what? Lock in with somebody. Lock it. And so she's got 2 people that she works out with. Mm-hmm. Now me. So I've been going with her, and neither one of us may want to work out, but then we know so and so is going to be at the gym, so we go. Mm-hmm. And within 5 minutes you're fine. But it's this accountability partners are really powerful things.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what was one of the biggest aha moments maybe you got from the study you did, or maybe a lot of it was just like, yeah, of course, but it was good to get validation?
Well, there were 2 aha moments. One, the one was, I just want to make sure I don't forget this.
Sure.
The first one was and it changed the whole scope of my study. I had one of the questions that, in the beginning of the study, I was trying to come up with the right questions to ask wealthy people because they were the first group that I interviewed. And I was struggling with that, to be honest with you, Brandon. But what happened was one of the questions that I just came to mind one day when I was meeting I had a lunch with one of the individuals in my study, and I said, what do you do? I was just trying to make small talk. Mm-hmm. And I stumbled onto the question that changed my whole study. I said, what do you do, when you finish with work? What do you do after work with your time? And the response I got is actually in my book, Rich Habits. It's amazing what poverty habits this guy had after work. But what happened was I said, oh my gosh. So I started asking all the rich people this question. Then when I studied the poor group, I asked them the same question. And let me give you an example of like this aha moment. So I would ask the rich people this question: what do you do after you're done with whatever you do for a job? What do you do with your time? And the wealthy people said, well, I'm on the board of directors of this nonprofit. I'm on the board of directors of this company. I write books. I do speaking engagements. I'm going to school at night. I coach at night. I'm, doing A, B, C, D, and E. There was probably 50 to 60 different activities that they were engaged in 2 to 3 days a week during a work week at night. When I asked the poor group the same question, their response was, well, I work hard and I'm really tired and stressed out, so I come home, I eat dinner, and I watch a little bit of TV because I got to wind down. And I might even, pull out a book and start reading. Usually it's a recreational book, entertainment book. And then I go to bed and I do the same thing all over again the next day. And then they scratch their head and they wonder, what am I doing wrong in life? Why aren't I successful? Mm-hmm. And so success doesn't happen 9 to 5. Success happens on the perimeter. It happens between the hours of 4 in the morning to 9. It happens between 4 in the morning to 9 a.m. It happens between the hours of 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. This is what I found with my study, this aha moment. The second aha moment was just when I finished my study, when I finished gathering the data, I spent then 16 months analyzing the data. And I would group the responses into categories. I had certain categories. I have 288 of them. When I compared the two groups, I had another aha moment, because that's when the first time, the idea that your daily habits are the reason why you're rich or poor. That's and so Rich Habits, the book itself, that name didn't pop into my head, for another 2 years or whatever. But that research that I did, the analysis, it hit me over the head, and I said, my God, it's your daily habits are why you're rich or poor. That was what blew me away, because the habits, the difference between rich people and poor people in terms of the daily habits is like night and day. It's like the Grand Canyon, with rich people on one side of the Grand Canyon and poor people on the other side. They just have vastly different daily habits, and that is, Brandon, why you're rich or poor. I'm not. Nobody can convince me otherwise.
That's great to hear. It's so easy, right? Just create some solid habits. That's a secret to everything.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, because I created the Rich Habits to be something called keystone habits. There's two types of habits. There's ordinary habits and there's keystone habits. Keystone habits are habits that overpower other habits. They are so powerful that they can influence other habits. For example, aerobic activity is a keystone habit, and it happens to be one of my rich habits. When you decide, for whatever reason, I want to lose weight, and the best way to lose weight is aerobic exercise. That gets the heart rate up. That's how you lose the most calories. Other than your dieting. Dieting, 70% of your diet, of weight loss, is your diet. But if you're not going to change your diet, the best way to lose weight is through aerobic activity. So what happens, Brandon, is you start exercising, this rich habit. You start doing 15 to 20 minutes a day, and then maybe you build it up to 30 minutes a day. Invariably, you lose weight. You do, especially in the first month. Then somebody says, hey, Brandon, you look pretty good, man. You lost a lot of weight. You're looking good. Well, what does that do to you? It strokes your emotions. It strokes your ego, particularly your emotions. So what the next thing you know, you're increasing your aerobic exercise. You're cutting back maybe a little bit on food, stop eating the Doritos. You know, you back off on them, and now your caloric threshold, which is the number of calories that you consume in a day, which will neither increase or decrease your weight. You start reducing your your calories, and you go below your caloric threshold. You start losing weight. You're losing more weight. People start saying, "Hey, Brandon, you're looking great, man. I can't believe the transformation." See that one keystone habit, aerobic exercise. It could stop you from eating junk food. It could stop you from eating too much food. It could stop you from smoking or reduce smoking. It has all of these. That one keystone habit can impact 3, 4, or 5 ordinary poverty habits. And that's why the rich habits, Brandon, are so powerful, because all you need is 1 or 2 of them to transform your life. 1 or 2 rich habits, and you can find yourself altering all of your other behaviors. And that's why they're so powerful.
Yeah. So I have to ask, what are your keystone habits that you incorporate in your life? Maybe ones that you already had that are incredibly effective, and then maybe ones that you incorporated into your life after your research.
Yeah, after my research, I started tracking my calories, because a number of the individuals in my study, they told me they tracked their calories. In fact, I think 57% of the wealthy in my study counted calories. But a few of them had something that I call a tracking schedule. I created it, and it's in my book, Rich Habits. So here's what I did. So it was July of 2007. I was 212 pounds. I'm 6'3", so it's hard to note for other people to notice, but I noticed. I knew it. So I said, boy, I'm gonna try this tracking schedule that these wealthy people are using. So I started tracking my calories. It took me about 2 months to figure out what my caloric threshold was, and for me, it was 2,140 calories a day. So when I reduced my caloric intake to under 2,140. And just to prove that, I just want to show you, this is the tracking schedule. So I carry it around with me, and I write down I have one on my computer, which is my main one, and I have one here in case I'm away from my computer and I forget. So I write down my calories. What happened was, from July 2007 to February 2008, I went from 212 pounds to 174 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And I was still doing the same amount of exercise. I was still doing my 30 to 60 minutes a day of either jogging or my Stairmaster. Mm-hmm. That didn't change. But what did change is I reduced my calories. And it wasn't so much that I was dieting. I noticed, for example, here's a good example. One of the foods I love to eat is the Burger King original chicken sandwich. I would have one of those a day, and the small fries, and a Diet Coke. And in my mind, that was 500 calories. Well, when I actually started tracking my calories, I found out, nope, it's 900 calories. It's almost twice the calories. I also found out that because one day I didn't really eat that much, but we had a function, and I went out and I had 2 large lobsters and about 3 beers, maybe 3 or 4 beers. And I said, oh man, I really blew it. I'm going to be 3 pounds overweight tomorrow morning. Mm-hmm. The next morning I weighed myself, I was a pound lighter. And I said, that's impossible. How could that possibly be? Then I did some research, and I found out that lobsters, a pound and a quarter lobsters, 160 calories. And I'm not really into butter, so I didn't eat butter with it, but it filled me up, and it was 320 calories, and the 3 beers were probably 400 to 500 calories. So during that whole day, I didn't eat anything, and I had less than 1,000 calories. I lost weight. That's when I started changing what I ate. So, when I go out to lunch, and I'm going to go out today because I'm starving, so I'm going to have a lot of broccoli. These supermarkets now, they sell hot food, and they have a lot of steamed broccoli, and you can put, the different flavoring on it. They all have different stuff. So when I eat that, I'm full. I feel like I ate 1,000 calories, and I happen to like broccoli. So my point is, you don't have to eat the things that you don't like, but you can find the things that you do like and eat them, and those things being having low calories. There's plenty out there. So it was really just changing. I wasn't necessarily in my mind eating less. I was eating different foods that were lighter and calories, lower in calories.
Mm. So that was one of the big habits you transitioned. What was the other one that you're saying? You said there was a couple of big ones, right?
I hate networking.
Yeah.
I love people, but I hate networking. I feel like it's, just to me it was a waste of time. So, I'm a CPA, so a lot of the networking things that we do is like the board, the Chamber of Commerce, or this organization or that organization. So I said, I don't like doing those kinds of networking. What I like doing is getting involved in organizations that mean something to me. So I started to participate in nonprofit groups that I really believed in, and I helped organize a business group in my local neighborhood. And I like that. I like that, doing that. So I involved myself in these nonprofit organizations that I wanted to involve myself in. I didn't go to the card exchanges. I didn't go to the Chamber of Commerce stuff. And the other thing I did is I said, I'll do speaking engagements at these nonprofit groups on my rich habits. That I like doing that, so I'll do that. So I started incorporating those rich habits, the things that I like to do, that wealthy people do, in the form of networking and volunteering, and I started meeting all of these people. The number of clients that I have now is probably, I'd say, at least 15% higher than when I finished my research, and we have a pretty decent sized firm here, so that's pretty good. And so I've increased my revenue, I've increased my net worth, I've increased. Been able to get my kids through college without having to, take out serious student loans, and I got 3 of them that I had to put through. So it's those habits of building, of networking and volunteering, they build relationships. It creates strong, powerful relationships, especially if you like the organization that you're involved in. You have to like it. If you hate it, get out, find another one. It's like an experiment. Look at it as a fun experiment. Okay, I don't like doing this one. How about this one? Well, it took me about 4 or 5 nonprofit organizations before I settled on 2 that I devote now a lot of time to. So.
Okay, that's great. So one of the biggest takeaways I hope people get from this is that how powerful volunteering, like you said in your study, saw that rich habits, people volunteered 5+ hours a week. And hopefully one of the biggest takeaways will be that contribution element, be it through mentoring people, or if you feel like you're not at that level yet or you feel worthy of mentoring, even though everyone does have something we can teach, just getting involved and volunteering and helping out in some way you can, because you're going to meet more like-minded people who are trying to create positive change in this world. And as from what you saw in your research, it's like a lot of people are very positive and they're good people who are incredibly successful. So you want to run with those crowds.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. You want the law of association. You want to surround yourself with other successful, like-minded people, and you will become wealthy, because what will happen is they'll open doors to you and for you, and for your kids too. If you're someone that says, I really, I don't care about me. Well, do you care about your kids? Mm-hmm. Because they'll get your kid into a college. They'll get your kid an internship. They'll get your kid a job after college. Those are important things. So, yeah, maybe you're not thrilled with the idea of volunteering, but if think about it for your kids, it might be something that you might be interested in, motivate you then.
Yeah. And so I'd like to bring this conversation back to talking a little bit about what you found out about brain health and how all of these, rich habits also contribute to a healthy brain. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, this is something I'm working on, Rich Thinking, my next book. I'm doing a lot of research on neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, and how the brain just works. And wow, I'll tell you, this is an eye-opener for me, because I didn't know that aerobic activity can actually make you smarter. It does it in 2 ways. One is it affects the hippocampus, which is where there's 2 places where neurons are actually born, and this is all new discoveries within the last 15 years, Brandon. Up until 15 years ago, they thought whatever neurons you had when you were born, that's what you died with.
Yeah.
And now they realize that the hippocampus generates 1,500 to 2,000 new neurons a day. It creates new neurons. What aerobic exercise does is it increases something called nerve growth factor, which is almost like miracle grow for the brain. So the hippocampus now is getting all of this oxygen-enriched blood fed into the brain, and the aerobic exercise also increases the production of glucose in the body. And the glucose, 25% of the glucose is used by the brain. It's the fuel of our body. Yeah. Glucose is the fuel of our body. So when you increase aerobic exercise, you're increasing the oxygen-enriched blood that flows to the brain, and you're also increasing the glucose. That's like miracle grow for the brain, and the hippocampus goes crazy. So instead of 1,500 neurons a day, it might be 3,000 or 4,000 neurons a day. The other thing is that because you're doing this aerobic exercise, which is a rich habit for your brain, the oxygen serves another purpose. It is a sponge for free radicals. When the glucose enters the cell in the mitochondria, it's like a feeding frenzy, like you see on the Serengeti. You know, the tigers are ripping the carcass apart. Mm-hmm. Well, the cells, inside the cells, they rip apart the glucose, and so the atoms and electrons are flying all over the place. Sometimes these electrons are freed up. They're taken out of the orbit of the atom, and they start independently. They call them free electrons, free radicals. They're floating around inside the cell, inside the brain cell as well. What the oxygen does, one of its main purposes is it's a sponge. It goes around and it soaks up these free electrons, these free radicals, and then it takes the oxygen through the blood, takes these free radicals, carries it to the lungs, and it goes out into the air as carbon dioxide. It's an amazing process. So aerobic exercise is a key to cognitive development, to neurogenesis, learning every day. If you learn new information, 30 minutes a day, learning something new, or you engage in a new skill, whatever that might be, it actually increases the neural pathways in your brain. When you increase a neural pathway, that means that you have now two neurons that are firing together. It's not two neurons. It's usually one neuron firing with 1,000 other neurons. So now every time you create a new neural pathway, you create a new synapse. Every new synapse equals brain mass. You've actually grown the size of your brain. And then you grow the size of the glial cells that support the brain, and the myelin sheath that surrounds the dendrites. Every neuron is made up of a dendrite, an axon, and there's one axon and there's multiple dendrites. And so when you do learning and aerobic exercise, you're actually increasing and improving the health of your neurons through that process, and that increases your IQ. You can increase your IQ at the age of 40 or at the age of 50. And actually, neurogenesis, they found in studies that neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons, takes place well into your 80s. What happens with most people who are above the age of 25, Brandon, because that's when your prefrontal lobe is the last thing to develop in the brain. Mm-hmm. That's when it stops developing. The brain goes through a process of pruning after that. What you don't use, you lose. So if you stop learning, and most adults, I think it's close to 80% of adults never read another book after they graduate either high school or college. Amazing, right?
It's crazy.
So what you're doing, what's happening inside your brain to those people who become poor people, is the brain starts pairing off, pruning the neurons. And you don't use it, you lose it. With wealthy, successful people, they have these rich habits, these rich thinking habits, and these cognitive ability habits, rich habits, that actually maintain their neurons and increase the number of neurons. They increase the number of synapses. They improve the health of neurons. So they're actually growing their brain mass as they age, and so they're by default becoming smarter with age.
Yeah, Tom, this is so big because, a lot of people who I work with are entrepreneurs, and so they really want to hear, okay, well, how's this going to make me more money, or how is this going to just allow me to progress forward in my business? And it's just so, hearing things like this are just so black and white. If you exercise, your brain functions better. If you exercise, you're going to get smarter. It's just so black and white, and it just makes it so easy and tangible for people to understand. When you get smarter, you're able to be more resourceful. You're able to actually make better decisions. You're able to make more money. And then when it comes to like reading and learning and feeding your brain, it's so black and white. If you feed your brain, it's going to grow. If you learn, then you're going to be able to progress forward. And I think it's tough because a lot of times like people want something so tangible that they can hold and say, okay, well I know if I like send out this amount of emails a day, or I generate this amount of leads, and I'm going to get this percentage of conversions, and it's going to make me money. And it's this kind of research that's coming out around in the field of neuroscience that's showing the effects that exercise and learning has on our brain and our lives as a whole. And the research that you're doing, looking at how these habits affect our lives, and the very strong correlation between these habits and wealthy people, are something that's it's just so powerful and so profound, because up until this point, it's just been put on the back burner. So many people just think that, well, it's something that, maybe I should do, but I don't really know how it's going to affect my life tangibly. So I really appreciate the work you're doing, Tom.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, it's all, it's all interrelated. And that's why I'm still blown away every time I talk about the rich habits, because it's amazing to me that wealthy people are, have these habits. They aren't even aware of it, Brandon. Mm-hmm. That's why they call it the secret of success, by the way. It's a secret to wealthy people. I'll tell you, in my study, these wealthy people, if I asked them what is the secret to your success, they wouldn't say my daily habits. Mm-hmm. None of them would. In fact, J. Paul Getty, who was a famous oil tycoon, they asked him, what do you attribute to your success, your great success in life? And he said, well, some people find oil and others don't. So even J. Paul Getty didn't really understand the things that he was doing that was creating his wealth. The things that he was doing were the rich habits. He had rich habits. Andrew Carnegie, who was the subject of who was it? The Think and Grow Rich book, right? So, okay, so that he had all these rich habits. One of the things he had was a mastermind group. They talked all the time, almost every day. So, these wealthy people, actually, when that interview took place with Andrew Carnegie, took place over a 2 or 3 year period, and he was a revelation to him going through this himself. He was saying, yeah, this is. He started thinking about, why am I successful? So many wealthy people go about their lives and don't realize actually why they're successful. And so many poor people go about their lives and don't realize, why am I failing? And that's why I wrote Rich Habits. I said, look, this is the reason. I got it. I found it. Here's what it is. I know it's not Martians landing on the planet that's going to shock you and say, wow, give you that wow, aha feeling. It's the little things, the little incremental things. But guess what? It's totally within your control, which is the cool thing. It's our wealth. See, our circumstances are temporary, made permanent by our habits. So you can be born into impoverished circumstances, and I went through that growing up. They're irrelevant, really. Your circumstances are irrelevant in life. It's what you do with your time here on Earth that allows you to break free of those circumstances, and I found that it's your daily habits that allow that to happen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tom. I love all this, man. And so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would really like to ask you one thing I ask every guest I have on my show And, much like you, I'm doing research with, some of the most brilliant people in the world that I can get who come on my show on unlocking the keys to create as many flow states as we can possible. So our ability to be in our zone where we perform best, we get the most enjoyment out of our work. No matter what it may be, maybe you're a businessman or woman, or maybe you're an athlete or a musician, no matter who you are or what you do, you perform your best when you're in your flow state. And if people haven't listened to the show before, they would, I'll just tell you right now, the flow state is that feeling we have when time slows down and speeds up almost like the same time. And you get really present, and everything seems to go in automation mode, and you just perform better than you ever have before. And it's almost like you're being pulled by some force even outside of you, where it's like you can't even believe that you're performing so well. And so, Tom, we talked a little bit before we hopped on this recording about your experience, and I'd love to hear you articulate that for our audience.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had so many flow states with the Rich Habits, but since we talked about the Rich Habits so much, I'm going to go back in time when I was 16, and I told you at the beginning that I was ranked in the top 10 in the Northeast in junior tennis players, and the 18 and unders at 16. Well, I was playing a match, and some days you just don't have it, right? Mentally. Mm-hmm. And so I'm losing to this in the quarterfinals of the tournament that is a big deal. It's a big deal because it's the kind of tournament that gets you into, college scholarships. So I'm losing, and I'm down 4-0. I think it was 4-0. I'm just playing horrible. And the guy I was playing against, his buddy behind the fence, I heard him say, "Hey, could you speed it up? This guy stinks. Could you get this over with? I want to go to White Castle at 5 o'clock or whatever." And something happened inside me, Brandon. It was like a trigger went off, and it's emotion. It's emotion. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is to be disgusted with ourselves. And I was absolutely so disgusted with myself that this guy's friend that I was playing was telling me, just mop this guy up quickly so we can get on with our lives because he stinks. Well, I went on to beat him 6-4, 6-3. I took the next 6 games. I was in the flow. The guy couldn't stop me. I completely changed my game around because he tapped into some emotion, and I think that's the key. It could be disgust, could be one of the great emotions that we have that motivates us to do things that we wouldn't otherwise do. We're just disgusted with ourselves. We're fed up with the way our lives are. So we decide to do something, and then you get into the flow because you're in a zone. You can't, that was my experience. I went on. I ended up playing John McEnroe's brother in the semifinals. I was in the flow again with him. I was beating him 5-1, and then it rained. And I lost the flow the next day, and he beat me 7-5, 6-2. So this flow is a mental state. It's tapped into your emotions. It's triggered by, oftentimes, by very strong, powerful emotions that push you into that passionate flow state. You just do things, and next thing you know, you're in it. So I think the key to getting into a flow state, for me, it was, in that case, disgust. And sometimes it's something that, and with Rich Habits, it was, I had an aha moment one night and decided to write a book. I got into the flow state for like 3 months. It's just, your emotions usually trigger it. Sometimes they're good emotions, sometimes they're bad emotions, but it's always emotions that get you into the flow state.
Yeah. So it sounds like those are two different spectrums. Like when you were playing tennis, it was that like, that's it, I've had enough, I need to go, I need to lock in right now. And with the book, would I be accurate in saying that it was more like the opposite end of it, where you're just like, oh my God, like I just figured, like there's something that everyone needs to know. Like I just, I had this epiphany of more of like, you went from like, you're feeling good, but being like, wow, like there's something amazing I can share with people. So the change of spectrum there.
When I finished the research and the analysis of the research, I had that aha moment, and I and sometimes your actions don't immediately occur after the aha moment. For me, it took a couple of months, but that flow state never left me. I was thinking about it every day, and then one night, as often happens when you go into the alpha, when you go to sleep, you're going from beta to alpha, and then theta, and then to delta, and then back out to, and then to REM, and then to theta again. Well, somewhere when I was coming out, we have a sleep cycle that lasts 90 minutes, so we have usually 4 or 5 of them a night. I was coming out of one of my sleep cycles, and the idea of rich habits, the actual name rich habits, for the first time popped into my head. And during that whole course of the night, I wrote the outline of the book, Rich Habits. I don't know where it came from, that outside force, but I think it is when you're in that flow. It has something to do with the reticular activating system, which is part of the limbic system. It gets toggled on whenever you pursue a goal or a main purpose or a life dream. It was toggled on for me, and outside information filtered into my RAS, my reticular activating system, allowed it right in, and I started seeing things that I never saw before, and Rich Habits just popped into my head. I don't know where it came from, but I have the reticular activating system to thank for it. That's the actual physiological part of the law of attraction. It's physiological, the law of attraction. It's your reticular activating system. It turned on for me, and it hasn't turned off for me. That's back in 2009 when it got turned on, and here I am, still doing it.
Is there anything in particular you think turned it on for you? Anything you can point to? Maybe any habits building up to that point where it did turn on?
You turn on your reticular activating system whenever you pursue a goal, a life dream, or some main purpose in your life. When you turn that on, imagine you're in an airport, right? And you hear all this buzzing around you. It's just white noise, right, Brandon? Then somebody says, "Hey, Brandon," and you turn around immediately. That's your reticular activating system actually at work. It's a filter for almost all the sensory information that you take in. But when you set a goal, when you are following a dream, you toggle on the reticular activating system, and now people and opportunities kind of manifest themselves out of thin air. They don't really manifest themselves out of thin air. It's just now you're tuned into them. You say, "Oh, maybe Brandon can help me with this. I met this guy named Brandon. Maybe he can help me with this." Well, you might have not even thought of that before, but now it's your reticular activating system's toggled on because you're pursuing some goal. That's how it works. The law of attraction is actually the reticular activating system being turned on.
So create that compelling goal or next step for yourself or dream, and just get yourself in alignment and start taking steps forward, and that's going to turn it on.
Yeah, I think actually, part of the flow state that you talked about is pursuing some goal or dream or main purpose, something that's really important that turns on the reticular activating system. And I think one day they're going to find out that flow state and the reticular activating system are joined at the hip.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun to unlock this, but I think it's very cool what we talked about today. I loved learning from you and learning about these habits and how powerful they are in really influencing every aspect of their life. But if I hope you guys took at least one thing away from this, it's that we can really create whatever we want in this world if we just decide to take the knowledge that we have about stuff that we learned today about habits and really start to apply it and understand that it's little things every single day that add up. It's little things like volunteering 5 hours or more a week, or just reading for self-education for 30 minutes a day, or coming up with a compelling dream or goal and starting to take steps for it. These little things every single day, or exercising for 30 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. It's very small things that create immeasurable amounts of positive results for you. So
yeah, and if your listeners want, I post all of my research articles on richhabits.net, so they can go there, they can get those research articles. I have free reports they can download and ebooks, and of course my books are on there, and they're everywhere, but you can get them on there. So there's a lot of good information there. It's this what we talked about just scratched the surface. They'll find out there's a lot more to this.
Mm-hmm. And so people can get your book Rich Habits. on Amazon, but also over at your site, right? What was your site one more time for us?
Yeah, it's richhabits.net. And I just came out with Rich Kids, which is talks about all the strategies. The Rich Habits is the keystone habits. Rich Kids is all the strategies that we can that'll help us, like how to find your main purpose in life, and also the certain things that wealthy people do in terms of etiquette. If you want a little bit of a lesson on etiquette, I've got a lot of information on the site and in those books. So richhabits.net, and it's on Amazon. It's in bookstores, so you can get it anywhere pretty
Beautiful.
much.
All right, Tom. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate you, man.
Cool, Brandon. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.